Louisiana is consistently ranked among the deadliest states for women. Advocates say it's because of a large part that stems from domestic violence.
And many of the women serving life sentences were domestic violence victims before they became prisoners. Here's investigative reporter Katie Moore with a closer look.
People call it crazy love. A relationship goes from passion to humiliation, manipulation to violence. There's really no love in it. In the minds of many, the victim cowers in the corner, but many times she fights back. Experts say we often shame her and blame her for not getting out. But in her mind, if she does, she will die. So it becomes a question of his life or hers. Tonight, we bring domestic violence out of the shadows into the light.
My name is W.G.
When the fights happen, they would split up, and then they would get back together, split up, get back together, that sort of things.
David, he was cocky, he was strong. He was strong with my mama. And so some kind of way, it just happened.
My whole world came crashing down.
It was the same old thing, music playing, people, quote unquote, good timing, drinking, laughing, dancing.
Me and my brother was in our bedroom, and until I heard noise.
Well, they were fighting over him seeing another woman, and she had admitted that.
They would start beating on him. So I'm hearing the walls like boom, boom.
When you first walk in the door, the living room, the furniture was scattered around, if you will.
Chairs overturned, there was broken broom on the floor. She just ran out into the street saying, "Help me, help me." But my friend jumped out of the car while I was still moving, and she came back and said, "He's on the floor, he's hurt."
Nicholson started CPR, doing the chest compressions, while Laura Eugene tried to breathe life into the mouth of David Fluence, the father of her youngest child. The police report says Laura was still doing CPR when the first officer arrived.
My mom on her knees, she crying. I was shaking, so I couldn't believe what I just seen.
So what makes you think it was cold-blooded murder, that it wasn't manslaughter or self-defense?
A couple of different things. First, the story had changed twice before officers had gotten there. She left, went to the bedroom, retrieved the knife, came back, and had stabbed him. So to me, that's not exactly in the heat of passion.
Laura and Fluence's relationship was toxic. Friends and relatives told police Laura would often confront Fluence about affairs she thought he was having. Police reports show those confrontations often ended with Laura battered and bruised. But September 4th, 2000 was different. Fluence was dead.
I asked to stab him because he was beating me bad, and I didn't mean to stab him. It just happened so quickly. And I raised my hand and the knife just went there. I was trying to scare him off of me.
The night of the murder, Laura told Detective Hemel Fluence broke a broom, hit her in the face, slammed her on a chair. At her trial, she added Fluence had choked her until she lost consciousness. Then she went and got the knife, telling Fluence to stop. The autopsy showed Fluence was drunk, with a blood alcohol nearly twice the legal limit. Laura told Hemel Fluence kept pushing her and, quote, "my hand slip." And at her trial, she said, he ran up onto the knife. She feared for her life and, quote, "it could have been me dead." Was it murder? Was it manslaughter? Was it justifiable homicide? Self-defense? In cases involving domestic violence, the jury has to decide whether the woman in this case had a reasonable belief that her life was in imminent danger. That's where something called battered women syndrome comes into play.
An explanation for some of the things, the counterintuitive things that juries want to understand. Why did she stay in the relationship? Why didn't she leave? If there are kids involved, very often the abuser will tell them that, if she leaves, he'll kill the kids or he'll kill her.
Decades of research have shown a woman's reasonable belief her life is in imminent danger can be clouded by years of abuse. For example, if argument after argument in a relationship ends with beatings and those beatings get worse, she might think he could kill me anytime.
Why did she wait until this particular point to defend herself when maybe she wasn't in an acute situation where she was about to be killed.
In June, the Louisiana Supreme Court issued a historic decision about domestic killings that brings light to the dark truth about how we view victims of domestic violence.
Despite what we think is an inherent sympathy toward women who are victims of abuse, there is a subtle hostility toward them in the courtroom.
The Supreme Court said providing evidence of past abuse, even documented by police reports, is not enough for an adequate defense. Attorneys must call experts to explain what impact that abuse may have had on the suspect's thinking.
And so at the trial, did you tell the jury about how you and the victim got along? That is, that he was striking you?
Yeah.
Court records show years of abuse left Laura with post-traumatic stress disorder. Her attorney, Robert Fauché, wanted doctors who treated her to testify about Laura's state of mind at the time of the killing, but the judge didn't allow it. Records show Fauché never called experts to talk about battered women's syndrome in Laura's case either. The jury convicted Laura Eugene of second-degree murder. One juror I spoke with said, quote, "There were multiple things that made me think this was not an accident, and that testimony from Laura's children sounded coached, and that they couldn't get past Laura's changing stories about what happened when people first got to the scene. Quote, lying about what happened if you accidentally stabbed him, say you accidentally stabbed him."
I lost both of my parents to it, and people don't understand how that feels growing up without my mom and my dad. Like, I had nobody to turn to for nothing.
Devana Eugene was 4 when her mother stabbed her father. These snapshots, flashes of their relationship with Laura behind bars.
I used to wake up in the middle of the night and like try to hold her, and she wasn't there. And that just ruined me.
Laura is one of 139 women serving life sentences in Louisiana. Using case records and media reports, we identified 36 women who killed their domestic partners. Of those, 21, more than half, alleged they were domestic violence survivors.
She would cry her eyes out, and there's nothing, and I mean nothing, I could do to satisfy that. I felt powerless.
Last July, 15 years into her life sentence, criminal justice reforms gave Laura Eugene and her children hope the state pardon board might give her another chance at life on the outside. This is an audio recording from that hearing.
Claiming that you're a victim of domestic violence. Actually, you were with the victim for about 5 years before this incident happened.
I was pregnant with my daughter, and at the time we started to get violent again.
Ma'am, despite the fact that we have sheriff's office opposition, the judge who heard your case opposition, and the victim's family opposition, I agree to commute your sentence to 99 years.
Do you think that she feels sorry for it?
Yes. Yes, he said it a lot, like, I'm so sorry I got myself in a situation.
Now, Governor Edwards still has to approve the pardon board's recommendation in order to give Laura a chance at parole. I want to say also that I reached out to David Fluence's family members, a number of them, multiple times, and none of them returned my calls and messages for comment on this story. Natalie and Ton.
Well, and Katie, if someone is a victim of domestic violence or the family member who feels their loved one's in danger, what kind of resources are out there?
There are quite a few, and fortunately they're getting better. Louisiana hasn't had a great track record in this area, but they are getting better, and there are some numbers that you can call. We should be able to put them on your screen. There's a statewide hotline that you can call. It's 1-888-411-1333, or here in New Orleans, there's a 24-hour crisis hotline. That number is 504-866-9554.
It's so important for the victims to speak up too. All right, Katie, thank you.